Alright, what's going on, guys? So, today's video, essential movements, basic footwork, okay? So, like all the videos in this series, we're going to start completely squared up. This is our learning stance. We learn all our movements from this completely neutral stance, okay? So even if you've been boxing for a while, you want to revisit this stance and just reinforce the synchronization between your hips, your feet, and your hands, your head movement, your weight shift, all of that. Always come back to this stance. Do it as a warm-up every day. Okay? Just nice and smooth. Okay. So, volume 1 talks about the weight shift. So if you haven't seen that video, make sure you check that one out. All the videos, they're not really in a specific order, but you make sure that at least do volume 1, because the weight shift is really the foundation for all these offensive and defensive movements, okay? And a lot of people never learn this because they never are taught this, okay? But the easiest way to learn it is to stand just like this, okay? It's hard to learn from your normal stance because there's too much going on. It's too new. It's too it doesn't feel natural and comfortable yet. But you learn it from this stance, the weight shift, and you'll notice, after a week of doing this, from this stance, your normal stance is going to feel more comfortable, more balanced. Okay. So here we go. I'm standing basically completely squared up, and I'm going to shift my weight from foot to foot. So you notice my head goes in the direction of the weight shift, right? Your hips, that's your center of gravity. So the hips are involved. There's a slight bend in the knee. There's a slight hip turn, maybe even a little pivot of the foot, depending on how much I shift, how much I turn. Right? But that is the weight shift, okay? Now from there, right, you can keep your arms relaxed at first. Shifting over. My arm falls straight down, points towards the foot where I'm leaning, right? There's things you can do to just kind of practice this. So we learn this stationary, and then when we move around, that's when we're going to get our steps, okay? So I pull my hands up like this. Basic kind of simple boxing guard. Shift. From there. Turn. Turn your hips and you get these straight punches, okay? You throw hooks and uppercuts as well. If you dip a little, right, you get your head movement. That's another essential movements video. Okay, so get these basics down. The next step, we shift and we get these little shuffle steps. This is the foundation of your footwork, right? Tap, tap. Now when you learn it from this stance, it should feel natural. Your feet know what to do. They're not going to let you fall. They automatically kind of go in a balanced place. Whereas when you learn this from your stance, it feels awkward. But get your footwork down like this. I'm just going side to side. I shift my weight over to this leg. My foot comes with me. Right? Okay. So we get these little weight shifts. And that's what causes you to step, okay? Got other videos talking about this. Typically when we learn our footwork, a lot of times we're taught, your head stays up and down, there's no weight shift. And you're taught to push, and push, 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 okay? Which is, there's a time and place for that, but if you do all your footwork like that, you're using a lot of energy to do that push and push. And on top of that, you basically have no balance in between that push. you're basically a sitting duck, because there's like it's almost like a half second where you basically can't defend yourself. Well, you got your hands up maybe, but it's easy to read, basically, okay? So when you learn these weight shifts for your punches, for your footwork, I have much more control, right? I get free head movement. That comes from these little shuffle steps, okay? Alright. So what you can do from this neutral stance now, if we shift over to one leg, we can stay here for a bit, right? Throw some little combinations. It's almost like a running in place motion, right? Shift to the other leg. Boom. Same kind of thing. So you shift over, you can stay in one position here. Okay? This is going to be a future video. It's fighting off different axis. Okay? Very useful for your head movement and your defense, and creating a what's called distance deception. Okay? Shift over here, you got the right foot axis, left foot axis. Okay? Alright. So once we can do our weight shift, do our little shuffle steps, then we'll start moving forward. Straight forward. Straight back. Using weight shifts. Little shuffles. Go side to side. 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 Okay? Now we can even kind of go diagonally. Diagonally forward. Diagonally backwards. Alright, so this kind of puts you out of that squared stance, but it's a good exercise because this is a lot more like your regular stance, right? Shift. So all directions, right? You get your guard up. Do the same thing while throwing punches. Shift, shift, shift. So you notice when I'm going forward, the coordination is shift forward, my left foot, right hand. When I shift the other direction, right foot, left hand. Shift, shift, shift. When I go backwards, it's going to be the opposite. I step my right foot and right hand. Left foot, left hand. Shift, 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 shift. Okay? So that's something you really want to get down. Going straight forward, straight backwards, right? Synchronizing the hands and the feet. And then, of course, we go side to side. Side. Okay. So side to side feels a little different. As the coordination gets switched around a lot, it seems like, depending on which way you kind of turning your hips. So try that one out. Okay. So the main thing is that you just want to make sure that you're using weight shifts for your steps. That's the main thing we're getting out of this, okay? Side to side. Boom. So right hand, right foot, left hand, left foot. Kind of like the backwards coordination. And then I can also do the opposite. Gets more of a shuffle motion, right, for the side to sides. So the side to side kind of gets mixed up. It mixes the coordination a little bit, but you know, you're gonna have to work on that one. Okay? Okay. So if you think about, if you're just naturally walking around, what you're doing is you're shifting your weight. That's why it feels effortless when you're just naturally walking around, right? That's what we want in our boxing footwork. That's what I like in my boxing footwork. I want it to be effortless. I want things to feel natural. So I try to relate things as naturally as possible. like walking, okay? So walking, I pick my foot up, shift my weight, and I just kind of fall, right? It's been described as a controlled fall, right? Now if I think about my hips, my center of balance, I get a lot more of a, I get a lot more control out of my movements, okay? A lot of different sports talk about this. Controlling your balance from your hips gives you a more athletic kind of gives you more athletic movements, okay? So that's what we're doing here. Okay, so once you can do the basic kind of little shuffle steps from your neutral squared up stance, stationary, and then you start moving around, right? Once you can do this comfortably, then you want to do it from your stance. So get in your fighting stance. You should feel a lot more balanced now. And what you'll do is do the same thing. Start stationary. Shift your weight. Front and back. Stationary. Add your punches. Right? Same kind of thing. And then once you can do that comfortably, start moving it around, right? Right? So check the same coordination going backwards, right? You got the right hand, right foot. Boom. Left hand, left foot. Just like when you were doing it squared up, it's the same kind of coordination going forward. These jabs are a little different because they're not really committing fully to a weight shift. Bump, bump, bump. But then when you add more of a weight shift to them, they do get that kind of coordinated step like you were doing when you were completely squared up, okay? So from your stance, start moving around all directions, right? So the basic kind of rules for the footwork are you step with the foot in the direction you want to go. So if I want to go to the left, I step left, and then I bring my right foot behind me, right? Go to the right, I step right. So I use a weight shift for my step, and then when I kind of reset my weight, I pull my trailing foot, or it just follows naturally depending on how smoothly you execute the step, okay? So it's almost like a shuffle motion, all right? And that's the basic kind of rule for the footwork. And a big no-no for the footwork is crossing your feet. So crossing your feet looks like this. If I were to go like that or like that, okay? So, you know, these rules, they're broken sometimes, all right? There are, you'll see in the advanced footwork that there are specific moves you can do that kind of break that crossing the foot, never cross the foot rule. But that's an advanced footwork technique, and you have to know that you're doing it, right? And you have to know when you're doing it and why. So a big, you know, for now, just worry about not crossing the feet, right? Just stick to these basic kind of steps, right? That's a later lesson, right? So you want to do this from orthodox and southpaw. You'll get more balance and coordination if you practice both stances. That doesn't mean you have to fight out of both stances, but you want to at least be comfortable and balanced in both, okay? So do the same thing. Move all around. Add your punches from southpaw. Start that stationary, just like the drill, right? Get the weight shift going, stationary. Get the little shuffle steps, stationary, and then start moving it around from southpaw as well, okay? Okay. So like I was saying, these steps are kind of like a little shuffle motion, right? So the other really basic footwork technique is a big shuffle. So if I step, so from my neutral stance, if I step, I take a bigger step, and I pull, I get this shuffle motion, okay? So notice my head. This is a weight shift. My head is kind of like it's kind of like a balancing, a balance point for my hips, which is the center of my gravity. So my head kind of moves in almost like a windshield wiper motion, and that causes my hips and feet to shuffle, right? So that's how you'll practice it, in these big exaggerated movements. But then in your actual application, you know, it can be a lot more subtle, a lot more like that kind of lateral motion you see people use when they're circling the ring for ring circles, right? But it's all based off these little steps. It's just a bigger motion of those little steps, right? But you can use this to get angles quickly, right? Very similar to like what Lomachenko does, okay? So practice these shuffles, right? So completely squared up, neutral. Take a big step. And then I pull more of my weight. It's more of a pull. So my trailing foot replaces what was my lead foot, the foot that moved first, right? So do this one in all directions. Forward, and I pull. And then I can, I don't even have to step, I can shuffle back, right? So in general, the rule is you always want to step in the direction first to maintain your balance, but for these shuffles, they're so fast that you can kind of get away sometimes with not having to do that. And the reason is because you shift your weight, you don't always need that little step. Sometimes it's quicker, depending on where your weight's already set, to just shuffle, okay? So that's something that some coaches will give you a hard time about, but it's so fast, and if you're moving away from the person, you're going to be moving away from the punches, and it's so fast that you can kind of get away with it. It's a lot safer sometimes than sometimes you just don't have time, or your weight's not set to do the step. So it's easier sometimes to just do the shuffle, okay? Okay, one more kind of quick note on just the really basic footwork, the steps here. In general, you want to take small steps. Most of the time you'll be taking little half steps, especially when you're advancing on your opponent, because you're going to be able to give more feints, you have more control and more balance. You're able to make more adjustments when you're doing these little half steps, and they're, again, they're coming from weight shifts. So you get all this free head movement, feints and stuff with these half steps. So in general, when approaching your opponent, you're going to want to be doing these little movements like this. And then when you have an opportunity to land something, you can bop, bop, take a little bigger step from there, right? You can advance with your footwork when the time is right, okay? But in general, it's kind of these little half steps here. You can take big steps going away. You can take big steps moving away from your opponent. That's okay. But you don't always want to be doing like a big lunge in, right? There's a time and place for that. Talk about that later in the video. But that's just a quick note. There's a lunge in step, but if that's all you can do when approaching your opponent, he's going to figure you out real quick, okay? But if you do these little setups, right? Little steps to get into range. And then when the time is right, then you can use your kind of punching footwork, or you can do this kind of in and out step, where you don't fully commit in, and that gives you the ability to shuffle out quickly, okay? So that's for a more in and out kind of thing. But you'll get the feel for it. You got to try these things out, okay? So that's just a quick note. Okay, pivots. From our neutral stance, we're going to just turn. I shift my weight over to the right, and I keep turning my hip. I can really emphasize these pivots. This is how you pivot on your punches, right? Boom. Get these big pivots. Boom. So we can practice these from our neutral stance. Pivot. Pivot. Pivot on the punch, okay? See, a lot of people talk about pivoting on the left hook, and there's an argument. They argue, do you do it, do you don't do it? And the answer is, it depends, right? If I'm leaving over here, I want to throw a left hook, left body hook, my lead foot doesn't need the pivot. I would lose power, because I'm throwing it more like an uppercut for the body. My back foot might pivot like this, give me power, right? Now if I wanted to throw a big hook to the head, I got to shift my weight more for a big hook. Boom. Now I get that pivot. If I'm on my right leg and I want to throw a left hook, I might boom, pivot. So it kind of depends. It depends on how much power you want to put in the hook. It depends on where your weight is at that moment, what's available to you. But that's a whole other video. Okay. So we got pivoting with our punches, just getting these nice big pivots. We can really do these 180 kind of warm-up punches. I love this. I do this as a warm-up all the time. Sink my weight some more if I need to, get wider. Just feeling the balance of these punches, okay? Alright. So the next thing we do for pivoting is we move in a circular motion. So from this neutral kind of stance, I'm going to pivot on the lead leg, and I'm going to go clockwise. So watch. I get these kind of little running in place punches, or running in place kind of hand movements, whatever you want to do. When you work your pivots like that, it ties together these little weight shifts, but the steps, you can pivot on these steps here, and you want to sync these up with your hands. All right, this takes a little while to get used to. So if I'm still pivoting on a lead leg, I'm going to go I'm going to go clockwise. So when I want to do a big pivot, I got more of a shift. There's more of a step involved. Right? So you're going to want to keep that same leg planted, or you're going to want to go in the other direction. Now I want to work counterclockwise. So this one is actually, for the most part, for me, it feels like a faster pivot. Okay? Okay. Yeah, so the counterclockwise off the left foot. You can do real quick pivots with that one. Alright? So we want to do the same thing with the right leg as well. Plant the right leg. And I'm going to go counterclockwise. And then I go clockwise. Okay? So I'm still thinking neutral. I'm still not really thinking about a stance per se. I'm still kind of working these just in terms of balance and coordination. I'm not really working off of a stance. You can take this drill and do this from your regular stance and then switch it up, do the same thing from southpaw with both feet. That's a great drill. But for now, we're still kind of just thinking about that neutral stance, okay? Okay, quick note about how you shift your weight during your pivots. So if I'm pivoting off the left leg, I'm going to kind of lean over onto the left leg, and I use that momentum to swing my right foot up. Then my weight's going to come onto my right leg. And I can pivot that foot. So I'm constantly, it's kind of like walking in these big exaggerated movements here. You can see it. Right, left, right. So when my weight's on my right leg, I'm turning. when I set my weight on the left leg, then I swing my right leg over. You'll get the feel for it, but that's an exaggeration. It's much more subtle, you know, when I'm doing it like this. Okay, so the same thing, you know, both feet. Do the same thing from your right leg. So the weight goes onto the right leg, then the left. Onto the left leg, I can turn and pivot and swing my weight over to the left leg from there. So it's more complicated to explain than it probably actually is. You'll get the hang of it. But again, if you need to do these exaggerated movements at first, that's okay. That'll help you learn better, okay? But it's kind of just an exaggeration of this motion. I'm just adding some steps in a certain direction. Okay? Cool. Alright. So at this point, you know, you'll notice when you get in your regular stance after you do these few kind of exercises, you're already going to feel more balanced, more natural, okay? But you're going to have to practice these, you know. You might have to do one a week. Practice it 5 minutes a day for a week. You know, each of these kind of drills. Next week, do the next one. You know, it's going to take time, but you'll be amazed how fast this information sinks in when you learn from this stance, okay? Okay, so the next pivot. This one is kind of like a check hook. Pivot of a check hook, where you pivot and step at the same time. So you practice this squared up stance. So I turn my hip and I step at the same time, and I'll add a punch so you can kind of tell what it would look like. Alright, so you see this kind of step. They use this a lot in Cuba, Soviet system, that whole side of the world. They really love this kind of side step, and they add a hook. You can throw a straight, hook, uppercut, but it's a simultaneous step and pivot at the same time, okay? Like that. Okay? Okay, so now we're going to think a little bit more about our stance here. These pivots, you know, we use these to circle around our opponent. So you can stay in orthodox. If I just pivot, right? I can pivot in place. I can pivot the opposite direction, right? Kind of like the last drill. But we can also step and pivot, right? I step out to the side. Then I pivot. I do the same thing the opposite way. I can step and pivot. This one feels a lot faster. And do the same thing from your back leg, right? Pivot off the back leg. Right? And that's how we get these circles, right? Imagine we got the opponent right here, kind of in this cross. Now we're doing circles, right? A little bit of pivots, but a lot of it is these kind of diagonal steps. So you imagine a circle, a big circle. You can put something in the center, and now we're going to work on circling, right? So this one we're a little more in our stance, and we're just going to circle with these little tiny steps. Trying to stay around this big circle, and then we're going to go the opposite direction. Right? So it should be a lot like the earlier drill with the walking, right? If I want to go right, I shift my weight to the right, and I reset. It kind of pulls my trailing leg to the left, shift, shift, right? And it becomes a smaller, more subtle motion the faster you go. So circle around an object, stay in your stance, right? Circle around, change direction, and then you're going to want to do the opposite stance. Both directions. Both directions. Both stances, both directions. Right? And you can stay nice and relaxed. We're just trying to get these foot motions down, okay? So you can be nice and relaxed here. Pay attention how your hands are syncing up with your feet, even when you're doing this circle motion, okay? Just like in the beginning with your side steps. It's very similar to that kind of motion here, okay? Okay, quick note about circling. Some coaches will really give you a hard time about when I'm circling here. I'm just shifting my weight, causing my steps, right? But some coaches will tell you that this is crossing your feet. But it's not, okay? From their point of view, it might look like it, but from my point of view, I'm just walking, right? I'm just going like this, but I just happen to be doing it around an object, right? So I'm just going up, but I'm going around an object now. So from the coach's point of view, it might look like I'm crossing my feet, but I'm not. If anything, I'm getting more of a, I go more bladed at times. But that's okay, because if he was to attack, I got the momentum here. Because of my structure, I can move away pretty quickly, okay? So again, crossing your feet would be this. This. Back here. Back here, like this is crossing your feet. You have no balance right here. This is just circling, and certain steps, depending on where I am in relation to my opponent, I might end up a little more bladed. So if you're circling from your stance, right, you just end up a little more bladed sometimes than usual, but that's still not crossing your feet, right? And if you were to circle using your ring circles, right, this is just little shuffles. Okay? So that's just a quick note on the circling drills, okay? Okay, so on that circling drill, you pick a stance, stay in it, circle both directions, right? There's other things you can do, that's another video. Okay. So that is circling around. Another thing you can do is imagine you are in the middle of the circle now. So I'm in the center. And then circle around a point in the center of the floor. So the way I'm stepping here, my feet end up tracing a circle, a small circle. You can imagine a bigger circle around me. So I used to practice this one, you have the tire drill, you see in Muay Thai, where they stand on the tire and bounce, switch their feet around and stuff. I used to stand on a tire and circle, do these 90-degree pivots. Right, and the same kind of thing as I'm not really thinking about my stance when I'm doing this kind of thing. I'm just getting this kind of coordination for this circular footwork. You know, this is really good for fighting on the inside where you got to take these little tiny circle steps. And you're not really changing your position too much. You're kind of staying in the same spot, but you're changing where you're facing, right? So you got an opponent right on top of you. Boom, 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 boom. Right? I'm not really moving too much. If I wanted to stay on the inside, right? Kind of want to smother him. And I take these, right? So this drill is great for that, right? So these you are now in the center of a circle. Shadow box with your punches and work these kind of pivots here. You can do, you see Mike Tyson doing the 180-degree spins and all that. You can do that as well. It's the same kind of drill, okay? One of the first things I learned was the ring circles, right? You hold a medicine ball and you just do big circles around the ring. In this lateral stance. Coach might blow a whistle or yell switch. You got to be able to change direction. Right? So you got to have that lateral movement, right? That doesn't mean you have to use it all the time, but you might have to use it eventually, right? If you use it all the time, that's kind of what they consider running, right? So you got the running in place. It's very similar to riding the bike, they call it. Ride the bike drill. If you're brand new, this is great. This really syncs up your hands and feet, okay? Basically running in place. You add these straight punches and move all around. You can even work this from your pivots. Drills from the last exercise. Work your pivots like this. Right? It's okay if your feet come up because it's just a drill. It's syncing up your hands and feet, but it's great for beginners to get them out of that that phase where you're so worried about what to do with your feet that you can't even throw your punches, right? They freeze up and someone starts pressuring them because they're too worried about how to move and all that. This will help you get out of that. You can do this for a round straight. If you don't have a jump rope, you can do this. Right. So that's a cool drill. And also, it's very similar to that kind of Muhammad Ali kind of footwork where you're constantly circling. Right? So it's a cool drill. Okay. Alright. So now this is the lunge in. So remember earlier I was talking about how in the beginning you're kind of taught, a lot of times you're taught to like just push off for your footwork. Now, if you want to get close to somebody and stay there, right? Think of Bernard Hopkins, right? He feigns and he moves and he throws a right hand and then he gets in close and works on the inside, right? So this kind of footwork is good for that. If you are trying to get in and get out, this push off and push off, it's too much, wastes too much energy. Plus, if you do a big push off, and now you are, it's pretty predictable. They can see that you're about to throw that right hand and push off like this. So you got to really set it up. A lot of times that'll be easy to read, and it's really easy to counter because you are basically stuck. You can't really do much until you land and that punch shoots out, okay? But guys like Bernard Hopkins are really good at throwing these kind of lunging right hands or even left hooks, and they use those to get on the inside, right? The reason they're so successful with it is because once they throw the punch, even if it lands or not, they grab you, they wrap you up and start working, okay? So that's kind of where these lunging steps I think are really the best. And in general, when you're moving in, you want to take small steps, getting in range until you can land your shot. And then you can take these big lunging backward steps, kind of a shuffle motion even. A lot of times it's kind of a shuffle, right? So even if you might take a little step, but you shift your weight and you pull your weight back, right? So sometimes people get upset that breaks some of the footwork rules about you always step in the direction you want to go. But it's so fast, and if they do try to hit you, you're already moving away, right? And it's so much faster than the normal step I think it's very useful. And plus, if you think about it, even if you don't take, you do a lot of times, you do take a little step to maintain your balance for the shuffle. But even if you don't, you're shifting your weight, which is the same motion you use to step anyways. So you shift your weight and then you pull the shuffle, okay? So either way, you know, everything has its negatives, right? You can do everything right and still get knocked out. That's what Roger Mayweather said. That's what is so fun about boxing, is you could do everything right and still get knocked out, okay? So, you know, you got to mix things up. You got to be unpredictable. That's kind of the whole point of this. But these are just different exercises that you can do to practice some of these footwork techniques, okay? Okay, the bounce. Okay, very similar to the last, the Muhammad Ali kind of jump rope almost footwork. Right, similar to that, but your both feet are going straight up and down, okay? Okay, so both feet kind of going straight up and down. And I'm getting the motion from my feet and my hips. I'm pushing both feet straight up, but these tiny little leans over, tiny little weight shifts, and I get the movement, okay? This is very tiring. It's useful in like the amateurs, and it has its time and place in the pros, but like for me, I would not want to be doing this for a long period of time, right? It's very tiring, but it can be very effective to switch things up, right? So from your stance, it's up and down. Makes you very mobile, but you know, you're gonna have to pick and choose times to throw punches off of that, right? So you probably wouldn't be doing that a whole fight, but it's okay. It's a good drill. Again, it's like the Muhammad Ali kind of thing. You probably wouldn't be doing that a whole fight either, but it's good for your feet. It's good for your speed. But you know, try it out. See if you like it. All right. So one of my favorite fighters, Guillermo Rigondeaux. Very defensive, but he trains very aggressive. It's weird because he fights so bladed and defensive, but in his training, he trains really square, really aggressive, okay? So a lot of what I studied how he trained and how he fought, and I kind of mixed up a lot of his techniques. And you see him hitting the bag, you know, he's pretty, in training, like I said, he's pretty aggressive hitting the bag, and he moves in, throws a combo, and he pulls back out like this, into this kind of neutral stance. Maybe even with a little bit of bounce, okay? Similar to the Muhammad Ali kind of thing, right? So I'm not lifting my feet, but I'm kind of bouncing in place, right? So this is a kind of way to use that typical bounce you hear about. You know, the classic boxing thing where they say to bounce, be on your toes and bounce all the time. But nobody really does that all the time. But when you do this like this, now, if I'm not lifting my feet up, I'm using a lot less energy. I might do microscopic kind of adjustments, but I'm using a lot less energy. And it makes the opponent think I'm moving around up on my toes and being really quick. Gives them a lot of feints. But it's a way that I can use less energy. Okay. But, you know, we talked about the lunge in step. And what Rigo does is he does not do that lunge in step. Right? He, bop, bop. He gets close. He throws his punch. He's got his rear leg back, so he can pull back out. You know, he shuffles out a step or two. And then he might be up on his toes, ready to change the position, to circle around, and move the guy around for a little bit before he settles back down and gets ready for the next offensive attack or setup, okay? But on the bag, he does this all the time. He's on the bag, he's moving around, he moves in, throws a combo, then he pulls straight back, into this stance and then moves around, okay? So the thing about going straight back is that's another thing you're told never to do, but it can be done. What you don't want to be doing, I think, is only going straight back. That becomes predictable, all right? But if you're on the outside, you step in, you throw your punch, your combo, your punch, whatever, you can go straight back, and then, you know, a step or two before you start circling away and resetting, basically. From your stance, if you're at long range, that's one of the safest things to do. At long range, you take a half step back, and that, you know, that jab misses you by an inch or two, just like that, okay? From long range, you can take these little half step backs, like Mayweather. Part of the reason why Mayweather is so effective defensively, he goes straight back all the time, long range, right? So think about Rigo. On the bag, you move in, throw your combo, and you pull back into this neutral stance. This is also very similar to Willie Pep, okay? Willie Pep, after he throws a combo, boom, 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 pulls back in this neutral stance. He waits for the opponent to do something, and then he sidesteps. He shifts over, right? But that's what gave him the ability to do a lot of the footwork that made him so great. Was he always he wasn't stuck to one foot position, right? He'd pull out neutral like this. He'd turn southpaw. So he was always switching it up. So that neutral stance, right? We're learning it. Learned it in the beginning, right? It can be used. You mix it in, right? You throw a combo, pull back, neutral, and then you move off from there. You can counter, see what he's going to do. But that's just another concept, something else that you can practice in these basic footwork exercises. Get used to that neutral stance, okay? Okay, guys. So one of the most important footwork exercises is this earlier, this walking with the punches, right? So why this is so important is because this is actually can be used as a technique called the straight blast, okay? You'll see Lomachenko uses this a lot. Once he kind of gets an angle on his opponent, he pushes forward with this straight blast. Triple G, I think, does it sometimes too. So it's a really good basic footwork exercise. It takes a bit of coordination, so you got to practice this one a lot. But it's great for self-defense, okay? So a lot of I think Wing Chun, karate, a lot of traditional martial arts have this in their kind of core repertoire, and it's basic. It's very basic, right? It's not aimed at competition, really. The technique is to overwhelm the opponent, right? You're not trying to sit back and set something up. You just press forward with a lot of pressure, and then from there you can get away to safety, or if you have to grapple from there, you can grapple, whatever. It's really good for self-defense, okay? So you really want to make sure you get this one down. The stepping, and just walking with these punches, right? And Kenny Weldon, he calls them panic punches. So when you do the backwards one, if you're in a bad situation that you need to get out of, and you can do this quick backwards retreat, throwing punches, okay, they might not have a lot of power on them. You can get some power on them from the speed and the structure, but it's going to deter someone from following you, right? If you're throwing a barrage of punches like that, and you can even make them big hooks, right? If you needed to. That's another kind of like MMA technique. I think Fedor Emelianenko used that one quite a bit. He'd throw a backwards barrage of hooks like that. But this straight blast, okay? We did the footwork earlier, but make sure you really practice this one. Walking straight in with your punches, right? If you use these weight shifts, you get this head movement for free. And that's what adds power to your shots. You sink your weight on these steps. So if he does try to push or knock you back, but because you're moving forward, you had good structure so that you actually can't be knocked off balance as easy as if you're just standing there like squared up like this, okay? When you're walking in, your momentum's going forward, and your structure, you got your you're dropping your weight on your steps, right? So it's giving you a base so that you do have good balance from that position, okay? But this is, again, something Lomachenko might do. You know, he's circling around. He might throw some jabs or punches down the center line enough to get an angle, and then once he's got an angle on his opponent, he rushes forward with a straight blast, okay? Maybe just like 4 kind of punches is enough to just push the opponent back, and then from there he can close the distance and get on the inside. But it's a technique for darting forward and putting some real good pressure on your opponent, and you're relatively covered, right? You extend your punches out all the way, your shoulder comes up to protect your chin, and like I said earlier, because of the way you're stepping with these weight shifts, you're getting free head movement, and you're dropping your weight, so you're nice and strong and solid. So it's going to be difficult for him to fight back against that force. He's most likely going to want to move away. Okay, so try that one out. Make sure you give that one a good amount of attention. Okay, and the last footwork drill is literally running with punches, right? So when you're on the treadmill, you're doing your road work, you throw these little punches like this while you're jogging, right? It's great on the treadmill, okay? But this really, I don't know what it is, but it really helps you get fast with your punches and your footwork, okay? So that's an easy one. You do that on the treadmill. You just run, jog, and instead of your typical kind of arm motions like this, you throw these little straight punches, right? And you can also, like we talked about earlier, you run in place and do the same thing. Similar. I notice a lot more speed when I do it actually jogging down the street. The whole rest of the day I'll feel a lot faster. So try that one out. I hope you like the video. Like, sub the channel, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.